welcome to Program Live. My name is Tarun, and Program Live is a new show about developer tools, about open source. And today I have with me my good friend Mathusan Selvarajah, and now the recent co-founder of a company called Crashlabs. Matheson and I worked together on a couple of projects last year, and we Matheson has, spent a lot of time in the open source ecosystem and a lot of time in the world of developer tools. He has a really interesting thesis on what he's building with Crash Labs, and I'm just really excited to get into it. So, first of all, thanks for joining, Matt. And
Of course.
would love to start with just like an intro to yourself and an intro to what you're working on, and just like feel free to take it away.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Excited to be on Program.live. Yeah, I'm Mathusan, and I am currently the co-founder and CTO at Crashlabs. Before I get into Crashlabs, a couple things about me. I went to UFD for CS, and right after school, I spent some time in open source building on open source Kubernetes. Um, So kind of got started on the developer tools, distributed systems, plus infrastructure space. And that kind of set the kind of path for my career after working. So I did this at Red Hat. After working at Red Hat, I kind of wanted to see Kubernetes in action. Like my entire time there, I never really, I've talked to companies using it, but I never really, had that experience. I was like, oh, this is really cool technology. I want to see it in action. I want to see how companies are using it. So looked around, like we had Shopify right here, one of the biggest Kubernetes clusters. They're running one of the biggest Kubernetes clusters out there. So I'm like, let's checked it out. Joined Shopify as a production engineer. Uh, and I was on the traffic team there. What we did essentially, we were kind of responsible for all traffic coming into Shopify.
Wow.
So essentially, like building out all the edge services required for Shopify's infrastructure.
So were you the
Uh,
busiest team during Black Friday?
we're one of the teams for sure. Shopify's architected pretty cool, where there's so many different production engineering teams, but all of us, our kind of main event the entire year is like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and making sure there's nothing like merchants can still sell and aren't blocked by anything. But yeah, like after that, most recently I was at Google working at Firebase. I was on the app hosting team. Pretty much, we built this product from 0 to 1, and it's a new product in the Firebase ecosystem. We pretty much help developers deploy their modern web apps easily using Firebase. So kind of like a Vercel or Netlify alternative, but within the Firebase ecosystem. But yeah, and then after that, we worked on some projects together, and then now Crash Labs.
That's awesome. So tell me about the core thesis of Crash Labs. Like you know, what is kind of what led to that? And feel free to kind of walk through how you navigated this idea maze, because I think that part is
Yeah,
the most interesting. It's just like how founders land on these kind of spaces, and you know, nothing is linear,
yeah,
often is not linear. So I'm just kind of curious to see what that path looked like for you.
yeah. I think it started about like a year and a half ago. Where I mean, I'm always working on stuff all the time, even outside of work, building stuff on the side. And I just started getting obsessed with like LLMs and what we could do with LLMs. It all started with chatbots, but then from there, people started building out, uh, using LLMs in the back end, building things that we never thought was possible, using LLMs in places that we never thought was possible. But yeah, I started getting obsessed and just like thinking of new ideas, whipping up different projects, um, uh, related to in the AI space. Um, and then pretty much also like I think towards my end of my time at Firebase, I was working on a project where essentially using LLMs to simulate humans. I read a paper about it, and it showed how effective we can use how effective it is where we can use LLMs to simulate real human behaviors. And pretty much the idea that I was trying to build out was using LLMs to simulate humans to test out ad creatives. So people that want to deploy advertising, sorry, any type of advertisement online to Meta or Google Ads, etc. Instead of using A/B testing, which is what most people do right now, and actually deploy real money and real ads to real people. You can deploy it to like simulated people and get some feedback, and then kind of A/B test that way instead of risking brand, etc. So I was working on this for a bit, and then I started realizing, okay, it's gotten pretty easy to build some stuff out with like tools like Cursor, now Cloud Code, and all that. But testing and checking whether, the improvements that I'm pushing to the app that I'm making or the agents that I'm making, it's not very straightforward because, LMs have made non-deterministic systems mainstream. One input is not gonna give the same output all the time. Um, and so yeah, I was just building this out. I met my current co-founder, like early in the year. At the time, he was working on something completely different. But since then, we were just like, you know, uh, sharing notes. He was on his own path, building something out. I was on my own path, building something out. And then later he came to me, like towards April, and he was like, "Hey, what do you think about using like agents to test agents?" And I was like, that's interesting." And that's kind of similar to what I was doing. Essentially, like you would have to use human simulations, use LLM for human simulations to solve this as well. So it's very similar ways of solutions that we're both working on. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I probably know more about building for developers than advertisers. So maybe I should just go work on this. Um, and because that's what my entire career has been so far. So, and my current co-founder, when I initially met him, I thought was like super smart guy, but at the time he was working on something like, um, not like he has all this AI experience working at Cohere, Vector Institute, but he's working on something completely different, like some some non-AI related problem. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
I told him back then, I was like, why are you working on this? But eventually he came back to it. He's like, all right, like let's build this out. And since then, like we have Crashlabs has gone through many phases in the past couple of months. But we were able to, build out a product that actually serves some, user needs. I'll give a quick, brief overview of what Crashlabs is.
Actually,
We,
before we do that, I
yeah,
mean, it's such a good example of um, you have a hypothesis for what you want to build, and then as you're building it, you realize the process of building this in this space is very difficult. And you go and say, like, let's make the tools to make building these types of things easier. And
yeah.
it's also more true to we are because we are tool builders. We build tools for other
Mhm.
builders. So it's actually a really, really nice story, actually, that way. It comes together quite
Mhm.
nicely. So tell me what Crash Labs is and what it's all about.
Yeah, pretty much based off that thesis, where like we noticed it's easier than ever to build up a 3-day hackathon project. But uh, to build something really like production ready, it's hard. And to ensure like it that your agent is reliable. So what Crossops is essentially it's a we call it the reliability layer for AI agents. We help companies building AI agents stress test their agents so we can surface failures before customers actually see them. So you can kind of think of it like kind of a automated red teaming in a sense. So yeah, we're taking more of like the stress testing and red teaming approach rather than the unit testing evals that approach. So I think these two serve two different kind of phases for companies building out agents, and we're on the end where like we're trying to help like more established companies that are deploying agents uh, ensure that the agent is reliable and is actually doing what they hope it's doing. But yeah, that involves many different things. As I mentioned before, we simulate their users that act like their users. And then we come up with we help come up with multiple different scenarios, um, edge case scenarios where we can simulate this entire interaction with your agent and then surface things that should be taken a look at or that, anomalies and things like that. That's kind of what Crashlabs is in a nutshell. Currently, we're focused on voice agents.
Okay.
Um, the reason is because voice agents is actually like super interesting. But voice AI has become very, very realistic, where it's very human like. It's hard to tell whether you're even talking to an agent sometimes. Um, but it's much more complex than a regular conversational chat-based agent because it involves many different layers. There's the base LLM at the very beginning, and then there's text to speech, and then VAD detection, voice activity detection, to make sure to be able to detect, when the other person stops speaking, so you can start speaking when the conversation ends, um, etc. And then there's also on the other side, speech to text as well. And essentially like all these different layers have to work well together to, you know, get a really effective voice agent working. And another thing is like it's much easier to break voice agents that are live than it is these other agents. What my co-founder does is pretty much he's become a very an expert at this. If you have a phone number on your website, he'll call it up and hook it up to Crashlabs and run the stress test, and then we'll send the video to the recording of the whole run to the CEO or CTO. That usually gets a reaction. It's not always a positive reaction, but it's always gotten a response. Um, but
That's sort
yeah,
of like
that's
the
it.
that's sort of like a security auditor's approach to things, right?
Yeah,
It's like you have like a white hat kind of bounty towards these things.
exactly.
There's so much that you covered here. Probably the thing I want to emphasize is that where you sit in the development cycle is not in the sort of prevention of these issues where evals and benchmarks come in, but
Mhm.
in the cure, right? Of like essentially responding when things happen in production. And do you have a sense on my hypothesis is that most of the issues will happen when you get stress test them in production, as all software and agents would be
Yeah,
no different, if not more particularly like skewed towards that. That's a really interesting insight. Do you find that the insights that get produced from Crashlabs then just get funneled back into your evals and essentially go back into your evals platform and it sort of creates the you're sort of completing the reinforcement learning loop in a
yeah,
sense.
yeah, pretty much. I think we're actually more focused on pre-production. So tend to hook up to your staging instance or like your staging agent, and then we start essentially before like the step you take before deployment or like going pushing to production, you go through Crash Labs. That's kind of our where we want to fit in. And yeah, it's pretty much like you find these like problems when you're running through cache labs or looking at these stress tests. And our idea is to like eventually close this loop where you can go back and improve your agent and add to your eval set so that your agent is aware of these edge cases and how to like interact with or how to deal with these edge cases. Um, yeah,
That's super interesting. So are you able to do a quick sort of demo of the product? What I would love
yeah,
to,
yeah.
as you're kind of putting that together, the things that I love to talk about with founders is like, this is especially true in consumer, but it's actually also true in developer tools. Every product has a kind of aha moment, right? What
Mhm.
are the moments that like someone looks at it and just like, oh, I get what this is for. Um, I would love it if you can kind of like maybe walk through a couple of those or any examples that you
Sure.
have. Feel free to
Yeah,
share
yeah,
your
yeah.
screen.
I got you. All right. You see my screen?
Yeah, I do.
All right. So this is kind of the main Crashlabs dashboard. You come in here, you configure your agent. So when you configure an agent, enter the name, description. We call it system prompt here, but it doesn't have to be the system prompt. It can be like pretty much describe what your agent is supposed to do,
Hmm.
like the things that are supposed to do and not supposed to do, kind of like the main features of the agent. And then from there, so I'll just, I don't know, Dave, I'm just gonna enter something, and then after that, you can connect your agent. One way to connect is through the using your agent's phone number. So this is how we'll
Oh,
start
because it's voice.
running. Yeah, so pretty much this is very optimized for voice agents right now. So essentially, you enter the phone number that we can use to reach your agent, and then you click create, and that will start setting up your agent within Crashlabs. So let's look at an agent that's already been configured. Here's an agent called Alex. This is a voice agent that's being used by an hospital. So essentially, patients will call in. It's pretty much deals with intake and all that. So essentially, when you like configure your agent, what we start doing in the background is generating policies. Essentially, policies are things that it's a single thing that your agent is supposed to do or not supposed to do. So we can look into it. So here, let's look at an example policy. Here, if booking completed, save booking closing line with confirmation number and SMS notice if applicable. So that's one policy, essentially the thing that the agent is supposed to do. Here we have policies laid out in a graph. Uh, each node here is the policy. And then
Wow.
we're able to, if you look at this node, there's like connected multiple different policies here. Essentially, when we break up the description into policies, we then find other policies that are related to each other, like each policy. So, for example, this policy is related to these other policies here. Essentially, uh, the way we form this relation is like when this occurs, how likely is some of these other policies supposed to occur in the same conversation? And then we use this like eventually build out scenarios of policies, of scenarios when we go and stress test.
And
Because
are you creating these manually yourself, or are these being generated based on input?
so based on when you configure your agent, you enter the system prompt, we configure these automatically. But that's mostly just so you can get started with Crashbox faster. But you can go ahead and like add a policy, remove policy, do it manually if you'd like. And yeah, and pretty much we break down policies into a set amount of categories, and of them is like accuracy and truthfulness, safety and compliance, task execution and recovery, user experience and interaction. These are just different categories we think
Yeah.
uh, make sense, like certain categories that you want to test out for. And let me show you
So this is sort of
stress
like
testing.
it's kind of like dynamically aligning your agent, and you're
Mhm.
sort of saying like we want it to be, this versus that. So can a policy be updated?
Yeah, it can be updated and the graph will update automatically as the point is the graph to like dynamically adapt as you continue building your agent. It's not going to be static. And our goal is to eventually like just take over this entire thing where like you're not going to come in and add or delete policies. We will monitor your agent in production and add, delete automatically. It's kind of like we hope for it to be like a kind of a living thing down the road, you know.
Very cool.
But
Very, very cool.
yeah, so we have a couple different types of testing approaches with Crash Labs. The one that we focus on the most is stress testing. Essentially, we use the policies that I described earlier to create a bunch of simulations. Uh, so here, if we were to start a stress test, we can either go with like a targeted category or like chaos mode. Chaos mode is essentially just like it's It's more random, and it tests across multiple different categories and runs a bunch of simulations at the same time. Uh, it's to kind of it's something that I would recommend to set going on like regular cadence so that you can uh, you'll be notified of things that you might not have thought of before. Um, but here, if we were to run a targeted category, we can like select one of the many categories that I talked about before. But essentially, when you select a category and you set the challenge level, we will focus on running stress tests for policies that fall under that specific category. So here, if we were to select safety and compliance, we can select the challenge level, uh, and then we can press start. That will uh, kick off a stress test, and pretty much we'll be running tens to hundreds of different simulations at the same time. You can configure it however you want, but the default is to run 10 different simulations at the same time, and then pretty much in the background right now, like the Crashlabs user agent, the agent that we simulated, is calling up the your agent and running these different simulations, and then we'll eventually get all that data, the simulation that data that we got from the simulations, and then parse it, and then let you know when things have gone on. So let me show you like a stress test that's already done.
This
So
reminds me,
here,
this reminds me of Sentry for voice agents. Has that anyone
yeah.
said? Okay.
I mean, yeah, I guess that's we definitely are inspired by people like Sentry and Datadog for sure. I think what they're doing for like uh, traditional software is something we would all love to like kind of emulate in this new era of software. Um, but yeah, like here we have a bunch of different simulations that we run. Let's take a look at one here. Uh, Essentially, when we run a simulation, we have there's a couple different components. I mentioned one earlier, which is the user agent, the agent that we simulate to be your user. And based on the simulation, we dynamically choose the agent that makes the persona that makes the most sense for the simulation. So here we have John, 44-year-old male, lives in San Francisco. John has a level, a specific verbosity level. So verbosity level is pretty much how much the user talks. So the lowest level is 10%, and pretty much that limits the user to like say 10 words. And and pretty much here I can place we have a in this simulation we have a whole audio recording of our agent talking to your agent, and uh,
Oh, I don't actually hear the audio, but
oh, you don't?
no.
Okay, okay, well, yeah,
That's okay. I will
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean this is I can probably picture it. It's like the
Mhm.
conversation is here, so it's just sort of playing out
Yeah.
what happened.
Exactly. So you have the
Very
transcript
cool.
here. And here we highlight like policy violation. We show all the policies that were tested in this conversation, and we highlight the violations that happened, and as well as like a rationale as why we marked it as violated.
Wow.
For some reason, in this case, the your agent or the agent that we set up is like cutting is like hanging up on the user and just like says goodbye and just like leaves. So that's weird. We gotta figure out why that was the case. That's usually uh, um there's a bunch of different configurations of the agent itself. But yeah. But yeah, essentially we run a bunch of these simulations, and at the end you have like a summary of all the policies that were tested in the test run, and then we come up with like observations that we've seen for this policy, as well as like patterns that we've noticed across the different simulations for each policy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then the next part is like scenario testing. So here we want to give us the stress testing is more like let us take over. Scenario testing is like you can custom implement any type of test case or test suite that you like, and you have as much control as you want.
Yeah.
So uh, here, let's look at a test suite that tests like some of the core flows of the agent. Um, Here, a returning patient. gives a name, tries to refill a prescription. And then we can take a look at this. Again, you have the description, the script that the user agent is supposed to follow, an expected behavior, and the persona that you want to use for the simulation. Essentially, when you run this, we will use all those different factors uh, to like kind of carry out the simulation. Uh, let's go back here. We can look at one of the runs here, code flows. So here, pretty much you can run the test suite whenever you want or run it on a schedule, etc. But this is more for like helping with iterating and iterating as you develop your agent. So you have some set test cases or test suites that you want to make sure it's covered and works at all times. Um, but yeah, that's kind of like the gist of Crash Labs,
Wow.
essentially. Yeah.
That's super interesting, man. I didn't realize how in depth this was. I really like how you guys are. I really like this approach. I think it's very makes a ton of sense. And I can imagine, the amount of like the ability you deploy a voice agent and you really kind of like the lack of observability around it is a huge problem. And the
Yeah.
lack of the ability to actually modify it, this feels like it just sort of gives you the voice agent. You deploy a voice agent, but then you can naturally bring it into your development and operational workflows in a much smoother
Hmm.
way. This is really cool. So, do you mind talking a
Yeah.
little bit about who are the types of people that are finding this to be I can imagine a few, and I can probably introduce you to a few.
Hmm.
Um, but who are the types of folks that are like finding that like 10x productivity boost because of this? And like, tell me some of those stories depending on like what you can share.
Yeah. Honestly, you'd be surprised, but I don't know if I guess it's part of the reason is because the tooling is not there. But a lot of the companies that we talk to, they just do it manually.
Yeah.
It's like before they push out a major change, you have the founders running through a bunch of like scenarios that they've written out,
The
call their
vibes
agent
test.
and testing it out. Yeah, essentially. And honestly, like a lot we do that. Everyone does that for especially their agent for the agents in general. But we've got to make it better so that you can actually ship like reliable agents. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of companies or like people that we think that find the most value of Crash Labs is we look at like scale ups, like essentially startups in the scale up phase and enterprises, so bigger companies that
Hmm.
are hesitant to get into developing agents or voice agents, um, mostly because of this reliability reason. They just have too much to lose. Like we've seen a bunch of different cases. I don't know if you've seen the Taco Bell one a couple weeks ago, where the Taco Bell essentially they deployed a voice agent to take orders on their drive-through, and then someone went in and ordered 1,800 water bottles, and then the agent is just about to say yes, and then it gets pulled away by a real person in the background that was monitoring the call. That was hilarious. But like essentially, there's many different cases here that where things have gone wrong. That's led to the companies either sharing down the project or scaling it down. Um,
So what is the cycle time between that call and Crash Labs? Like, are you actually transcribing in real time, and can you see this analysis happening in real time?
yeah, I think that's what we want to get to eventually. We are currently more in the pre-production phase, but we're building out tooling to like get to the production where we can provide the same value they're providing pre-production in production as well, and then kind of like close the entire cycle of development for agents. Um, but yeah, we also built up this thing called Crashed.ai. Essentially, like it's like an open source repo where we just document the kind of failures that have made the headlines. And the Taco Bell one is one of many. And we know this is going to continue happening as more and more organizations, adopt AI. And our goal is to like help these organizations like adopt adopt them in a way where they're not going to make the headlines. So Uh, yeah.
That's super interesting, man. Well, listen, I mean, it's such a green field right now, and you guys have such a like great perspective on the problem. And yeah, this is just one of those things where like I'm so glad this exists now. Um, and I'll definitely be recommending it to a bunch of people.
I
The
appreciate it.
um what's on the docket for the next few months for you guys? Like what are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? Is there anything that you want to tease? Just feel free to go ahead.
I think there's a lot. I don't want to give too much, but we have the next couple months will be very busy for us. We have quite a bit planned out. A lot of them revolve around integrations, around different voice providers and workflows for our developers. And then obviously we have like a lot more on the roadmap to actually make these simulations better and more realistic. Uh, and then we have a whole production, the kind of closing the loop thing that I was talking about earlier. And there's many different projects revolving around that. But yeah, with this next couple months will be like always gonna be heads down building
That's
and
awesome.
helping folks out.
Do you mind if I ask what do you mean by integrations and what are the types of things that
Mhm.
people can kind of like where does that sort of fit into the kind of how do integrations play a role in Crash Labs?
Mhm. Yeah, so currently, when you're building a voice agent, most folks are using these voice providers, like for example, Vapi, LiveKit, Retail. There's many different voice providers out there where they instead of you building everything from scratch, which ends up being very complicated, you can use these platforms to hook up a phone number, select a different text-to-speech model or LLM you're using. Pretty much like you can build a pretty good voice agent, a decent voice agent, just no code. You don't have to write any code if you use one of these providers. Um, and then there's also I want to give a shout out to like the provider, a provider that I really like because they're open source and we use them a lot. It's called Pipecast. Essentially an open source framework for building voice agents. But essentially, like these different providers, we want to make it whoever is building on. We want to make it for our developers building on these different providers to easily integrate with the Crash Labs and like start testing easier. Um, they shouldn't. We got to meet developers where they're at, and that's where they're at these like voice providers.
That's awesome. So on a parting note, why don't you tell
Mhm.
people how they can get started with Crash Labs, where to find it, where to find you. And yeah, like if someone is watching this and is excited, how can they get started?
Yeah, check us out at crashlabs.ai. And if you want to chat with us, just send us an email at founders@crashlabs.ai. I'll also plug out our open source project, crashedout.ai, where you can just go check out crash outs, AI crash outs as they happen. So, yeah,
That's so funny. Listen, man, thank you so much for taking the time. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with?
no, that's it. Thanks for having me, Jordan. Appreciate it. This has been
Awesome.
great.
Cool. Well,
Cool.
this has been great. Thanks again, Matt, and looking forward to hearing a lot more about Crash Labs in the future.
Awesome. All
Take it
right.
easy.
Bye.